The sum of a number and its reciprocal is 10/3. Find the number. So since we're only looking for one number, then the first thing we do is label our variables. So we let x be the number we're looking for, right? So now we know that the sum of this number and its reciprocal is 10/3. So we have to find the reciprocal of the number, right? So the reciprocal of x is going to be 1 over x, right? Because the reciprocal of anything is 1 over that value. So now that we've labeled our variables, we can decipher the problem and come up with our equation. So it says the sum of a number and its reciprocal is 10/3. So now this is the problem that we have to solve, and the way we solve it is by finding the LCD and multiplying both sides by it. So we want to find the LCD of the denominator. So you can think of this x as having a denominator of 1, right? So we're looking for the LCD of 3 and x, which is just going to be 3x. So now we multiply both sides of the equation by 3x. So on the left, I'm just going to distribute that 3x into each term. So the first term we get 3x times x, which is 3x squared. And for the second term we get 3x over x, and the x's cancel out, and they just give us 3. And then on the right side of the equation, these 3's cancel out, and we're just left with 10x. So now since we want to solve for x, what we want to do is move that 10x over to the left side, so we get 3x squared minus 10x plus 3 is equal to 0. So now this is a quadratic equation with leading coefficient other than 1. So we can use the quadratic formula, or we can try to factor it. So trying to factor it, I want to use the special factoring method, where the first step, which I'm going to write here, is to multiply the first coefficient and the last coefficient. Right? Oops, excuse me. Getting ahead of myself. So 3 times 3 is equal to 9. And then the second step is that you want to factor positive 9 into two numbers such that when you add them, you get negative 10. Right? You get the middle term. So 9 factors into 9 and 1, and it also factors into negative 9 and negative 1, right? And similarly, it also factors into 3, 3, and then negative 3, negative 3. But notice that we've already found two numbers that when you multiply give you positive 9, and when you add them give you negative 10. So those numbers are negative 9 and negative 1. So then the third step would be to rewrite this guy in terms of negative 9 and negative 1. So we want to split up that negative 10x. So we want to write 3x squared minus 9x minus 1x plus 3. And then the last step is to factor by grouping. So we want to take the first two terms and then the last two terms. And we want to factor by grouping. So we want to factor out the GCF from each of these terms. So for the first term, we can factor out a 3x, and what's left is x minus 3. And then for the second term, we can actually factor a negative 1 to get x minus 3. And so now notice that there's an x minus 3 on both of them. So factoring that out, we get 3x minus 1 times x minus 3. So going back up here, let me erase all these lines here. So going back up here, we have that 3x minus 1 times x minus 3 is equal to 0. So then the last step is to use the zero factor property and say, well, either 3x minus 1 is equal to 0 or x minus 3 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 1/3 or x is equal to 3. So the number is going to be 3 or it's going to be 1/3.